The clearest, most universally accepted articulation of the principles of Jewish faith are the Rambam's, Maimonides' 13 principles of faith. These 13 principles were codified in his commentary on Mishnah as an introduction to chapter 10 of the book of Sanhedrin. It was also added to Jewish prayer, to Jewish liturgy, in the Ani Mamin prayer, in the Yigdal prayer. And these 13 ideals, these 13 principles are a concise formulation of what are the necessary preconditions of faith for the Jew. What are they? They are these 13. Though these 13 were contested, they were books written to try to counteract them. There were other formulations that seem to have tried to rival the Rambam's 13 principles. There has not been much debate for centuries, and we could say with great confidence that if you want to know what the framework of Jewish belief is, you should look at the Rambam's 13 principles. Now, he bases it on the Mishnah in the book of Sanhedrin that tells us a few things. It tells us, number one, that all Jews have a portion in Olam Haba, again, loosely translated as the afterlife. And the Rambam elsewhere writes that the ultimate goal of life, why are we here? What are we living for? It is to gain admission, to be part of that select fraternity, the people that merit a portion in Olam Haba. On a little bit of a deeper level, what we're also told is that our soul originates from the world of souls. It is temporarily placed in here, where we are today, the current iteration of man, body hosting a soul. And the objective of our time here is to create a path for our soul to go back to its homeland, to where it comes from, to allow it to journey back home, and that's the objective of Torah. And we're told that there's 13 basic principles that are needed to ensure that you get there. And the Mishnah tells us all Jews, by dint of being part of the Abrahamic fraternity, of being part of the Almighty's chosen people, they have a close connection to God, and therefore they're guaranteed a portion in Olam Haba with certain exceptions. Now I want to go through a little bit of those exceptions and break them down into two separate categories. The exceptions fall into two separate categories, as we shall see. So the Rambam lists the people who do not have a portion in Olam Haba, rather something else happens to them, and they are the heretics, the apocrisim, which is a different kind of heretic, those that repudiate Torah, those that repudiate resurrection, those that repudiate Messiah, rebellious ones, those that cause the public to sin, those that deviate from the path of the public, people who do sins brazenly with an outstretched arm, informers, people who impose their dread upon the people, people who impose their dread upon the public, not for the sake of heaven, murderers, habitual speakers of Lashon Hara, and those who reverse their circumcision ceremony. And the way this breaks down is, you'll notice there are certain sins that are so bad, that are so unconscionable, that are so heinous, that someone does that, they can have a portion in the afterlife. Someone's a murderer. It's the worst thing that someone could possibly do, to kill someone else. It's so bad, you lose your portion in Olam Haba. Someone who is an informer, someone who causes the public to sin, someone who is rebellious. These are people who are booted out of heaven because their sins are beyond the pale. There's a second kind of person that doesn't get admitted to Olam Haba, to the afterlife. And what you'll notice is that these are not people who are not admitted because of terrible sins. Rather, they never were on the invite list to begin with. So for example, one of the things that are listed here of people who lose their portion in Olam Haba is someone who reverses their circumcision. which was a common thing that happened in the Roman times, in the Greek times. People would go to the gymnasium, they'd go to do these sports in the nude, and they'd be embarrassed to have their circumcision. They go through the very painful process of undoing it to make it look like they were never circumcised. Now, I actually looked throughout the whole Torah, and you don't find a prohibition against circumcision removal. There's no prohibition against it. So how is it possible that someone who does something that's not even prohibited, it's so bad they get booted from the afterlife? So the answer is that it's not that they get kicked out of the afterlife because of their sin. It's that they never were in it to begin with. Our circumcision that we have comes all the way from the times of Abraham. That is this the covenant between Abraham and God and Abraham's descendants. The only reason why we have a connection to spirituality, to purity, to the world of our souls, is because we, by default, are part of the Abrahamic fraternity. Whatever we have with Abraham, we're kind of latching onto his relationship with God. We're joining the fray. We're jumping on the bandwagon. And therefore, whatever relationship he had with God, we are kind of inheriting in it. Therefore, what happens when someone says, you know what? I am not interested in this bind of the Abrahamic fraternity, this symbol of the brand of Abraham. I'm not interested in the circumcision. It's not that this is a sin, that it's so bad, kicks them out of heaven. It's because they themselves are saying, I'm not interested in the prerequisites for heaven. It's not that they did something so bad that they lost admission. It's that they disincluded themselves from the group of people that have admission. And therefore, you don't want to be part of Abrahamic's family, his destiny, his legacy. Okay, you find yourself now outside of the doors of heaven. When we're told that there's 13 principles of faith, these, again, are ideals that may not be even a mitzvah. For example, there is no mitzvah in the Torah, thou shalt await Messiah. It doesn't say it anywhere. And even the references for Messiah are not explicit, they're not overt. Again, the Talmud spends a lot of time trying to show where it's hinted. For example, we recently had the idea of the splitting of the sea, and after the splitting of the sea, there's the song. How does the song begin? Az Yashir Moshe. Then Moses will sing. That's if you read it literally. Says the Talmud, this is evidence that Moses is coming back. It's an evidence. This is evidence of the resurrection. But again, it's a hint. It's not something which is explicit. And so there's no mitzvah to believe in the resurrection. There's no mitzvah to believe in the Messiah. Yet if you don't believe in it, you're out of the fold. You lose your portion in Olam Haba. That's the answer. The answer is that when there are certain ideals, certain behaviors that are central to be part of the team, the fraternity, so to speak, that gains you admittance to Olam Haba to begin with, there's 13 principles of belief, and there's certain behaviorisms that are necessary to be included in this group of people. That's the general idea of the 13 principles, what they do, what they evoke within us. And as we spoke about last time, they break down into 3 different categories. I want to get more into these 3 categories because I think they open up for us new vistas of faith that we never had access to prior. The first 5 of the 13 principles orient around our relationship with God. The next 4 orient around Torah. And the final 4 orient around reward and punishment, but also around the afterlife and the events that we don't experience in our world, reward and punishment, Messiah, and resurrection of the dead. It is interesting that these 3 ideals, the idea of God, Torah, reward and punishment, they relate to the 3 revelations of history. There's 3 revelations in history, and all of Jewish history, and most of Jewish prayer orients around these three ideas. And that is creation. That's when God created the world. B, it's Exodus, when God revealed himself not via creation, but via taking the nation out of the land of Egypt, doing all the miracles concomitant to the Exodus. Sinai experience, revealing himself, that's Torah. And C, it's the future redemption, which we call Messiah, resurrection of the dead. When we say that we believe really in these three revelations of God, the one of the past, the one of the present, and the one in the future. The past is where God hid himself, so to speak, in the world. God created the world, but did it in a way that not every single thing that exists is stamped in a undeniable way. This is the handiwork of God. God is, so to speak, hidden behind the facade of nature. And that was God's creation. And of course, God is still feeding life to this creation, but that is going back, so to speak, to the 6 days of creation and the world that resulted from God's work. And then you have Torah. Then you have this middle revelation. And there's many important differences between these two revelations. So most important is that whereas God is hidden in nature, God is not revealed in the world around us. His handiwork is present, his signature, so to speak, is not. And therefore, if someone wants to understand God, someone wants to reveal or discover God from the world around them, they could do it, but it's pretty hard. It's hard because he's hidden. There is the veneer, there is the facade, there is the obstacle of nature that seems to obfuscate God. And then what happens at Sinai? Or even earlier? What happens at the burning bush? Moses has prophecy. And that kickstarts essentially 40 years of non-stop, clear, undeniable, revealed miracles on a regular, ongoing basis. So of course, it starts with Moses, and he starts having prophecy with God. And for 7 days they're talking, and they're planning the Exodus. And of course, Moses is objecting, he's resisting, he doesn't want to. We read about this chapter 3 of the book of Exodus. Finally, Moses goes to Pharaoh and starts doing miracles. He drops the staff, together with Aaron, it turns into a serpent, and that's just the beginning. And of course, we have the 10 plagues. And each one of these 10 plagues, well, what do you see? You see the nature being defied. And you see targeted, specific miracles. They're targeted because they only affect the Egyptians. They don't affect the Jews. And they're covering the totality of existence. Every power that people could have said is its own independent power, now everyone sees it's undeniable to all. This is really all coalesced in the hands of God. And he's able to dispense it and disperse it at will. You have a glass of water. The Jew drinks it, it's water. The Egyptian drinks it, it's blood. And that's present throughout the whole land of Egypt. Every single Jew has this incredible, transformative, transcendental experience. God is involved with me on an individual. He knows who I am. He knows that I'm the Jew, my neighbor is the Egyptian. I have the water, he has the blood. And that is the pattern throughout all the 10 plagues. Culminating, of course, in every Egyptian household, there's at least one dead person at the death of the firstborn. And amongst the Jews, even the dogs don't bark. This is not a hidden miracle. This is not some sort of what we have to try to figure out, where is God? It's evident. It's evident to all. And it gets even more intense. It escalates. Jewish people leave. Of course, there's all kinds of miracles. You have 18 minutes to gather millions of people together and move them 120 miles. That's, of course, something that can only happen via miraculous means. The Jewish people spend 7 days until finally they're trapped. They're surrounded by their enemies. and the enemies have blood in their eyes. They are out for revenge. And then behind them, they have the water, the Sea of Reeds. And again, the miracle intensifies. The water split. There are like walls on each side. And the Jewish people walk on dry land. The Egyptians walk and the water crashes upon them. And the miracle is so overt, it's so undeniable, everyone in unison starts erupting in song. This is my God. Zeh keli vanveyu. This, says the Talmud, they're pointing at it. There's no denial. It's evident. It is sensory. It is present in front of them. And you know what? The miracles are yet to intensify. A few weeks later, they're out of food. They're in the desert. What starts happening? Mountains and mountains of magical manna descend from heaven every day. And of course, quail at night. And that continues multiple meals a day. For a nation of millions, it continues for 40 years, uninterrupted. 40 years, never miss a day, besides for Shabbos, of course. You get double portion on Friday. This is not some sort of revelation where you have to discover God from his hidden perch, so to speak, as the puppeteer overseeing history and the world around us and nature. This is present, undeniable. They want to have water. Simple. Moshe, go hit the rock, and the rock splits into two, and there's enough water to give water to a nation of millions, each one of them, by the way, with many, many animals and livestock and things like that. Again, these are God revealing himself in a way that's undeniable. And of course, the absolute zenith of that is at Sinai. An entire nation, men, women, children, future people who have yet to be born. In fact, the Talmud says future converts that have yet to convert. All of them converge on the mountain and temporarily experience prophecy, hear the words of God directly. And of course, they hear it, and it's too painful for them. And they tell Moses, no, this is beyond us. This revelation is even too much for us. But it's quite clear. And the Torah emphasizes this and reiterates this again and again. This was not something that Moses heard by himself. This was the entire nation. Every single person experienced prophecy. Directly. God talking to them directly. And you know what? That is a fact that has not been contested since then. And that is the second revelation. And of course, that continues all the way to the Jewish people entering the land of Israel. Once they enter the land of Israel, they're almost on their own. Yes, there are still some miracles, there are still some prophets, but Moshe's gone, the ever-present miracles are mostly gone, and it's a different world. But these 40 years, that's a non-stop revelation of God, where God exposed himself in the world. And God tells us, as we read in Deuteronomy chapter 4, God spoke to you face to face. Something that's never happened, never been replicated. That's the second revelation of our history. And it's targeted because it's only for the Jews. No one else experiences it unless future converts. They were there kind of on a spiritual level. And that's the second kind of realm of our history. And there's many parallels, by the way. The Talmud points out that if you count the amount of times it says, and Hashem said, let there be light, let there be this, let there be that. You count it in Genesis, it's 10 of them. There's 10 utterances of God in Genesis. The revelation of Genesis is 10 utterances. Well, what's the revelation of the Exodus? 10 plagues, corresponding to the 10 utterances. 10 commandments at Sinai. These are all the same thing, God revealing himself. The difference is that for the creation, it's hidden. God's utterances are hidden in the world that he created. If we want to discover God through that process, we have to extrapolate. We have to extract from the world that he created those 10 utterances. Whereas by Sinai and by the Exodus, the miracles, the 10 plagues and the 10 commandments were evident to all and undeniable to all those who participated in it. Well, if you already have the complete face-to-face revelation of the Exodus, why is there a need for a third revelation yet to come? And the answer is that the Jewish people got the Torah, had the experience of the Exodus, witnessed these tremendous miracles, and therefore they were elevated to a level of emunah, of faith, that's unprecedented. Well, what about the rest of the world? What about all of humanity? We're a small sliver of everyone. We are anticipating a third revelation, a revelation that will create the same effect that the second revelation gave to us, and it had the same effect for all of humanity. Everyone will know. Everyone that is created will know that you created. Everything that's been formed will know that you informed him. Everyone who has a soul will say, Hashem Elokei Yisrael Melech u'malchuso b'kol mashallah. God, King of Israel, is king, and his kingdom dominates all. That's what we're looking forward to. That's the third realm, the third revelation that we're anticipating. And these three things are the three principles of the 13 principles. The first 5 are belief in God, God the Creator. Now, it's important to stress, when we talk about God the Creator, what's the first verse of the Ten Commandments? I'm Lord your God, who took you out of the land of Egypt. For us, the belief in God is not just the God who created the world, it's that intimate relationship of the God who took us out of the land of Egypt, the face-to-face kind of relationship. But that's the first, God as Creator. And then the next 4, God as the giver of Torah. And finally, which is for the Jewish people alone. And the next 4 are that third realm of the revelation, the third epic of history, and that is the upcoming revelation. I want to point out, just briefly, that this pattern exists elsewhere. For example, a very famous teaching in the Talmud tells us that the world is a 6,000-year ordeal. 6,000 years. This is from the book of Sanhedrin on page 97a, on the bottom. They taught in the Academy of Elijah, the world is 6,000 years. 2,000 years of emptiness, of desolation. 2,000 years of Torah. 2,000 years of Messiah. This one statement is going to provide for us a framework of Jewish history, also a framework of world history, but also it's going to highlight these 3 kind of shifts that are going to happen in the world. You have 2,000 years of emptiness. This era is a time where no one recognized God, where the revelations were not manifested to the world, where people were engaged in idolatry, where people engaged in paganism, where the revelation of God was completely hidden. And who shows up at the end of those 2,000 years? Of course, that's Abraham. And in fact, the Jewish sources peg Abraham to be born in the year 1948 from Adam. And Abraham shows up and he begins to discover God. Now, how does he discover God? He discovers God who was hidden. God is hidden in the world, and Abraham analyzes and studies the world and draws God out, so to speak, of the hidden world around him. Abraham takes the world of emptiness, of desolation, and provides the world with some light, infuses some light amidst the darkness. And he's going to end one era and open up the next era. He's going to open up the world in which the ideals of monotheism are going to be perpetuated to his children, but also God's going to promise that his children are going to be the people that get the next, so to speak, get a down payment, so to speak, on the next revelation. They're going to be the nation of God. They're going to be the kingdom of priests and the holy people and the holy nation. They're going to be the ones to whom God is going to speak to directly at Sinai. However, as a caveat, they're also going to be the people that are going to be treated very harshly. They're going to spend 400 years as foreigners in a foreign land. They're going to be enslaved and tormented. And only then will they have, after having gone through the iron crucible of Egypt, only then will they be able to have these tremendous revelations at Sinai. The Talmud also tells us that Abraham himself studied Torah. How old was Abraham when he studied Torah? The Midrash tells us he was 52. What's 52 plus 1948? It's 2000. Exactly at the year 2000, the shift happens. The emptiness is over. God is now known to the world to a certain degree. And the next era begins of consolidation. Abraham and Abraham's descendants are going to be the nation of Torah, the nation that's going to have that tremendous second revelation at the Exodus and at Sinai, and that's going to help cause and precipitate the third revelation, the revelation of Messiah. So you have a discovery, then you have 2,000 years of consolidation. Jewish people, they're almost on an island. Abraham, he influences tens of thousands of people, but they're all gone from history. We don't know where they are. They disintegrated. Just Abraham and his family maintain these truths. They go down to Egypt, tormented, but they grow, but they stay distinct. And then they get the Torah, and that becomes the Torah of the Jewish people, no one else. And you know what? No one else is even interested. No one's interested. The idea of monotheism is a crackpot theory. And that essentially continues for 2,000 years. Though the Jewish people encounter great civilizations, none of them start buying in to what we're offering. And then what happens? The 2,000 years of Messiah come. And almost overnight, the whole world goes crazy trying to learn what we know, what we've been working on for thousands of years. And then you have Christianity starting, and that's kind of like bringing the world or the masses towards a closer version of monotheism. And then you have Islam starting. And these are like Abraham's grandchildren continuing his legacy, so to speak, to bring the world much, much closer to the end game of Messiah. So you have, again, these patterns. And these patterns are fulfilled, by the way, with the three patriarchs as well. Abraham discovers, Isaac consolidates, and Jacob disseminates, spreads it out to the world. And there's all kinds of parallels in their character. So number one, Abraham, where is he born? He's born outside of Israel. When he comes to Israel, he discovers. Isaac is born inside Israel and is told that he can't leave. He has to stay there. He wants to leave. God says, no, you got to stay here. Now's the time of integration, of consolidation. It's not yet time to spread the message. And then comes along Jacob, born in Israel, spreads the message everywhere else, dies actually outside of Israel. And only post-mortem is brought back to Israel. Similarly, Abraham is circumcised at an advanced age. Isaac is the first one to be circumcised at 8 days. Jacob, of course, is circumcised, but what does he do? His sons, two sons, circumcise the people of Shechem. That's Shimon and Levi. His other son, Joseph, circumcised all the people of Egypt. When people came to Joseph for grain, he would tell them, when he was a viceroy of Egypt, he would tell them, you have to circumcise or else you don't get any grain. Again, this idea of the third element, the Jacob, so to speak, element, it's not just keeping the Torah and its ideals to ourselves, it's spreading it to the world. By the way, we have the idea of three temples. First temple, second temple, third temple, corresponding to Abram, to Isaac, to Jacob. Discovery, consolidation, and then exposure to all. When we're talking about these 13 principles, they're fitting into these three revelations that are at the bedrock of our nation and what we stand for. And again, like we said, if you look at the first verse that the Rambam brings for the first of the principles, he brings the verse, I am the Lord your God who took you out of the land of Egypt. It does not say, I am Hashem who created the world. Rather, I am Hashem who extracted you from Egypt. What's demanded of us when we believe in God is not just God who's the creator, but God is the creator who took us out of the land of Egypt. Let's see what that implies. So with that introduction, let's dig into principle number 1, the belief in the existence of God.